Alrighty. Alrighty, I think we are almost good to go. Sending a push here. There we go. Just took it a minute. Alrighty. Good afternoon from the 1011 Now streaming studio. I'm Danielle Shenk. This is Inside the Story with the Flatwater Free Press, a nonprofit news organization in Nebraska that emphasizes investigations and feature stories. Today, we're sitting down with the co-journalist who broke the story about Governor Jim Pillen directing state agencies to make some major budget cuts. So joining us now is Chris Bowling. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Alrighty. Now, there are still some unknowns surrounding these budget cuts, but do you know how many state agencies are being impacted and about how much they're being asked to cut?
Yeah, so it's at least 14 state agencies is what we found, and they were asked back in April to find $43 million in cuts for last fiscal year, which would have ended at the end of this past June, and then they have 237 million is the goal for cuts in this fiscal year.
Alrighty. And so in your lengthy article here, you guys were digging into this quite a bit. You have some nifty charts that I'm going to scroll down to. Can you kind of explain what these are showing us?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the whole pie chart, the circle, is their general fund allocation. So agencies get funding from a few different sources, but general funds is a very large source of that, and that's essentially tax revenue, just things like that. So anyway, the whole circle is their general fund allocation, and then the small slivers are the cuts from their general fund allocation. So those were the targets they were supposed to hit, and that is the share of their general fund allocation. And the first one is last fiscal year, and the one you're looking at right now is this fiscal year.
Alrighty. And so do you know with this pie chart who's going to see kind of the biggest cuts or which sectors are going to be the most impacted?
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's relative. You can see economic development down there. That's a very large share of their general fund budget. But if you're looking at just the most money, that would be Health and Human Services. So their goal was to cut $200 million dollars this fiscal year. And in a separate report, the state hired a contractor to help them, look into these cuts and identify them. That report identified, the Medicaid program and child welfare as two of the big sources of where that savings could come from. Obviously, those are both really important programs, and so cuts of those size, are definitely interesting and definitely would raise a lot of questions as to how they would achieve that.
Right. And so what is Pillen's goal with these cuts?
Yeah, so the goal is to save $525 million dollars between last fiscal year and this fiscal year, with 350 million of that being ongoing spending reductions. And the goal of it all is to put toward property tax relief. At least that's how I understand it. So yeah, what I was told is the legislature will get a updated budget to look over this special session, which would include a $200 million dollars in budget reductions that would go toward property tax relief, and that there also would be $200 million dollars in cash funds that would also go toward that.
Alrighty, and so we'll get to that in just a moment, but you also spoke to quite a few lawmakers and a couple of state budget leaders in your article who were actually shocked by these cuts. Can you kind of tell us why?
Yeah, for sure. So, I guess basically the fundamental checks and balances of state government is that, the legislature decides how money is spent. They have the ultimate say on, here's how we're allocating the money, here's what we want you to spend it on. I mean, every time they do a new budget, they look over it for months and months. There's public meetings. There's a lot of work goes into it. So some of the legislators I talked to felt that the governor was basically overriding those checks and balances, going behind their backs, and basically telling these agencies, "Hey, I know that the legislature appropriated this money, but I don't want you to spend it." Other legislators, they didn't know the details of all of it, but they felt that property taxes are a really serious issue that needs action right now, and if this is how we're going to do it, then that is good. And these are agencies that the governor appoints the heads of,
Hmm.
so there is some amount of control the governor has in their budget. But like the fiscal people that I talked to that you referenced, I mean, Tom Bergquist, who was in the legislative fiscal office for 46 years, he had never seen cuts of this size. He'd never seen cuts done in this way. So it's one of those things. It depends on who you talk to, but pretty much everybody agreed that this was definitely an unprecedented way to go about this. It just
Hmm.
depends on, do they feel that it's warranted or not.
Right. And so, has a past governor ever done anything like this that you know of?
So in a way, yes. So whenever the state goes through, a huge recession or something like that, this happened when Ricketts was governor, and I believe 2017. It happened during the dot-com bubble. It's happened a lot of different times when, revenue is going to be below projections because of a time of economic peril. The governor and the legislature, as I understand it, would work together to essentially balance the budget. Like, hey, what do we need to cut? What do we need to cut back on to make sure that we're all good? Um, this is very different because we're not in a time of economic peril. Tax revenue came in, I think it was 0.1% below projected, which is really good. So this is all being done to accomplish a policy that the governor wants to pass, which, from the people I've talked to, has never happened before. And obviously, there's people who think that property taxes are a crisis right now, and so I think they would see it a little differently. But so in some ways, yes, this has happened before, but not quite in the way that it's happening right now.
Right. And so, as you kind of mentioned earlier, the special session is underway right now. And so, by the time that it ends or even during it, will senators have more clarity? And I guess will we have more clarity about why Pillen wanted these cuts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, the state's budget director told me that senators would learn details about the cuts during the special session. So presumably that would come in the form of the budget bill that he talked about. So that $200 million reduction in general fund spending would likely identify, hey, here's what we're cutting, here's where we're pulling back, all that sort of stuff. That's definitely going to generate questions from senators, probably some public meetings. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of discussion about this during the special session, if and when that gets introduced. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball and know how all of it's going to play out,
Right.
but you can't really go like one thing without the other. It's going to have to come up.
Right. And so, as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything else that you want to add about this article about digging into these unprecedented cuts?
Yeah, no, I think people should, know about this. They should pay attention. The rationale that the state's budget director and some others have given me is there's a lot of excess and stuff that needs to be trimmed from the state's budget so that it actually runs more efficiently, and this is actually about making government better and not worse. And there's a lot of other people that say, how can you cut this much money and state services are not going to be impacted? So and like I mentioned, child welfare, our child welfare system in Nebraska has been struggling in the past few years, especially here in Omaha. So the idea of cutting more from that definitely has some people very concerned. And so, Yeah, it's just something to pay attention to because, it could be a thing of, hey, this is a great idea. This is how we're going to be spending less and getting better services. Or it could be a thing of, we're, cutting off our nose to spite our face, kind of situation. And it could be a bad situation for some people. So it's just a very important issue to pay attention to.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
Thanks.
We'll likely see you again in the future as we check in with the Flatwater Free Press and what they're working on more often. So Chris's article, Pillen directed agencies to make unprecedented cuts ahead of special session, is available on 1011now.com or flatwaterfreepress.org. For more news and updates, visit our website and follow us on all of our social platforms. From our newsroom to wherever you are, see you on the next stream.